It's a real puzzle. How can one guy be seen as a revolutionary freedom fighter and a divisive ideologue? A hero to some, a villain to others? Well, that's the enigma of Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, one of modern India's most fiercely debated figures. On one hand, you have this view of Savarkar as a subject for serious, calm historical study. A figure so complex that his life demands a close look, no matter what your personal politics are. But then, on the other hand, he's seen as the absolute polar opposite of Mahatma Gandhi, a man whose entire ideology seems to challenge the very foundations of the nation Gandhi fought to build. So, how in the world do we make sense of these massive contradictions? Well, we're going to trace his journey, from his work as a social reformer to becoming the architect of Hindutva, dive into his clash of ideals with Gandhi, and then get into the ultimate accusation that still follows his legacy today. Okay, so let's set the scene. The year is 1924. After 14 brutal years in prison, including a decade in the infamous cellular jail, Savarkar is finally released. He's a man who has been through hell, profoundly changed, but his political fire, that was far from being put out. And what's really fascinating is what he decides to do first. You'd think he'd jump right back into revolutionary politics, right? But no. Confined to the Ratnagiri district, he launches an attack on something much closer to home, the rigid, orthodox traditions inside Hindu society itself. And he didn't just give speeches, he took action. At a time when the caste system was brutally enforced, his moves were genuinely shocking. He wasn't just preaching unity, he was out there actively breaking taboos, founding temples open to everyone, and even dining with those considered untouchable, all in an effort to build a single, unified Hindu society. But here's where it gets complicated. At the exact same time that he's being this radical social reformer, he's also creating a political ideology that would become his most lasting and, for many, his most divisive legacy. He developed and defined this concept he called Hindutva. Now, it's absolutely crucial to get his distinction here. For him, this wasn't about religion, about Hinduism as a faith. No, for Savarkar, Hindutva was a political and cultural identity, a nation of people bound together by a shared land, shared blood, and a shared civilization. And this belief led to a pretty uncompromising political stance. For Savarkar, the only way to a free India was through a strong, consolidated Hindu nation first. And the sentiment, in his own words, was crystal clear. We will fight for freedom with you, without you, or if we have to, in spite of you. So, as you can probably imagine, this assertive consolidation-first ideology put him on a direct collision course with Mahatma Gandhi. This really became one of the great ideological battles of the Indian independence movement. Their visions for a free India just could not have been more different. And nothing shows how deep that divide was better than their views on the caste system. While Gandhi, at the time, saw the traditional structure as a source of social stability, Savarkar saw it as a poison, a critical weakness that was holding Hindu society back and had to be completely destroyed. Their strategies for getting freedom were also night and day. Gandhi's entire philosophy, as we all know, was built on nonviolent resistance. Savarkar, though, was a lifelong revolutionary. He saw nonviolence as a weakness and was convinced that only an armed struggle could ever truly free India from British rule. And this long, simmering ideological battle, this deep, fundamental opposition to Gandhi's entire philosophy, well, it all comes to a head with the most serious and damaging accusation of Savarkar's entire life, right after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. Okay, so let's walk through what happened. 10 days before the assassination, a bomb plot against Gandhi fails. In the investigation that follows, and especially after Nathuram Godse succeeds in killing him, the conspiracy's threads start to come loose. One of the conspirators turns state's witness, and based on his story, Savarkar is arrested, accused of being the mastermind behind the whole thing. So the entire case the prosecution had against him, it all came down to the word of just one guy, Digambar Baje. He was an arms dealer involved in the plot who became an approver, basically a state's witness. He claimed he saw Nathuram Godse and another key conspirator, Narayan Apte, get Savarkar's blessing for the assassination. But then, in court, the assassin himself, Nathuram Godse, completely denies this. He takes full, sole responsibility for what he did,
insisting that he had broken away from Savarkar's leadership years before and that Savarkar had absolutely no idea about the plot.
So in the end, how much independent evidence was there to back up the approver's story? A big fat zero. Nothing. Without any corroboration, the judge ruled that the charge against Savarkar simply wasn't proven, and he was honorably acquitted. But a legal acquittal isn't always the final word in the court of history. Almost 20 years later, long after Savarkar had passed away, the whole conspiracy was looked at again, and the ghost of that accusation came right back. So, in the 1960s, a new body called the Kapoor Commission was set up to reinvestigate everything. Now, this was an inquiry, not a criminal trial. It heard brand new testimony from Savarkar's former bodyguard and secretary, evidence that was never even presented in the original court case, and it concluded that yes, Savarkar and his group were in fact behind the murder. And this, right here, leaves us with the final nagging question at the very heart of his legacy. He was a social reformer who fought against the evils of the caste system, and a political ideologue who literally defined Hindutva. A man acquitted in the biggest criminal trial of his day, yet implicated decades later by a formal inquiry. This is the fundamental contradiction that guarantees V.D. Savarkar will remain one of history's most contested and most fascinating figures.